The humiliation was thick in the air. "Don't you ever talk back to me, Gerald," the white man hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "You are nothing here. Nothing. Clean this room now, or don't bother coming back tomorrow." "Sir, the floors are neat. I've cleaned them over and over again," Camille, the black cleaner, replied. But without another word, Gerald took a full cup of water and poured it directly onto Camille. The cold water drenched her hair, ran down her face, soaked through her uniform shirt, and pooled at her feet on the freshly mopped floor. The shock of the cold made her gasp, but it was the deliberate cruelty of the act that truly stole her breath. "Now you have something real to clean up," Gerald said. But little did he know, he hadn't just humiliated a cleaner. He had disrespected the very woman who had the power to destroy his entire career. Before we move properly into this story, click on the subscribe and like button if you believe no one should be unfairly treated, no matter who they are. Then type in the comments where you're watching from. You will definitely get a reply. The shiny floors of Rhodes Tech Solutions executive level reflected the harsh fluorescent lights as Camille Rhodes, disguised in a maintenance uniform, carefully guided her mop across the polished surface. The nameplate on her chest read Janet, not Camille Rhodes. The hands that had once signed multi-million-dollar contracts now gripped a mop handle, red and raw from industrial cleaning solutions. As she worked, the click of expensive leather shoes echoed behind her. Spencer Hayes, operations manager, a man who had never once looked her in the eye during executive meetings, now loomed above her, a stack of reports clutched in his manicured hands. Camille's eyes, usually confident and commanding in boardrooms, flashed with quiet fury. Her jaw clenched as she nodded silently and bent down to retrieve the now-soaking papers. Every part of her wanted to stand up, reveal herself, and fire this man on the spot. But that wasn't the plan. That wasn't why she was here. Camille Rhodes, 28-year-old Harvard Business School graduate, the brilliant executive known for her commanding presence and sharp business acumen. She'd earned the respect of industry leaders and been featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 for her innovative approach to sustainable technology. Rhodes Tech Solutions wasn't just another company. It was her legacy. Founded 35 years ago in a garage by Franklin Rhodes, Camille's father, with nothing but a dream and $2,000 borrowed from his grandmother, it had grown into a $5 billion fintech giant. Franklin Rhodes was one of the few black CEOs in Silicon Valley, a man known for building his empire on two unwavering principles: innovation and integrity. Now 60, his silver-streaked hair and deep laugh lines told the story of decades of challenges conquered. But recently, his vibrant energy had faded. The heart attack 6 months ago was a wake-up call for all of them. Doctors had been clear. Franklin needed to step back. The 80-hour weeks that once fueled him were no longer sustainable. Suddenly, succession planning wasn't a someday topic. It was now. Camille, his only child and a natural leader, was the obvious choice. But Franklin had reservations. At a quiet family dinner in his modernist home overlooking the city, he finally voiced them. "Camille, you know I couldn't be prouder of everything you've accomplished," Franklin began, his deep voice steady and warm. "Your business acumen is extraordinary. Your technical knowledge is unmatched. But I'm worried about what you don't know." Camille set down her fork, raising an eyebrow. "What don't I know, Dad?" Franklin sighed. The weight of his legacy was etched across his face. "You don't know what it's like in the trenches. You've never seen how this company operates from the ground up. Never experienced how management treats the people who don't have fancy titles or corner offices." Camille opened her mouth to respond, but Franklin lifted a hand to stop her. "When I started this company, I was the janitor, the accountant, the salesman, the engineer. I knew every inch of this business because I lived it. That perspective is invaluable. The reports you get don't tell you about the culture that exists beyond the executive floor. And lately, I've been hearing things, whispers, about how different the company culture has become from what we intended. But people perform for the boss and for his daughter. You can't lead what you don't truly understand." The challenge hung heavy in the air. Camille, never one to back down, leaned forward. "What are you suggesting, Dad?" What they came up with that night was bold, nearly unthinkable. Camille would go undercover as part of the night cleaning crew. 2 weeks. No special treatment. No shortcuts. No privilege. She would live and work as thousands of employees did, from the very bottom of the corporate ladder. The transformation was dramatic. Her designer wardrobe gave way to worn, practical clothes. Her sleek, straightened hair was allowed to return to its natural curls, then covered with a plain headscarf. Her manicured nails were stripped bare, her signature makeup removed, designer glasses replaced with plain contacts. Even the diamond studs that never left her ears were swapped out for simple metal hoops. Camille Rhodes disappeared. In her place, Janet, an unremarkable cleaning woman who would blend into the background. Her placement was arranged through a third-party cleaning company, ProcClean, to keep HR from making any connection. Her paperwork and background were watertight. As far as anyone at Rhodes Tech Solutions knew, Janet was just another cleaner assigned to the executive floor. The stakes were clear. Camille had 2 weeks to understand the true culture of the company she would soon lead. 2 weeks to determine whether the company her father had built still reflected the values he had instilled at its founding. What she didn't know was how those 2 weeks would transform her understanding of Rhodes Tech Solutions, of Williams Innovations, and of her own worldview. The next day, Camille, now fully transformed into Janet, stood nervously at the employee entrance, adjusting her ill-fitting green uniform as she waited for her first shift to begin. Her once polished hands were bare, and she couldn't stop fidgeting with the unfamiliar employee badge clipped awkwardly to her chest. Her first night as a cleaner began at 10 p.m., long after most executives had gone home. Orientation was brief and impersonal, a rushed walkthrough of cleaning protocols, safety procedures, and a stern warning that theft of any kind would lead to immediate termination and possibly criminal charges. The supervisor barely made eye contact as he handed her a ring of keys and a checklist of duties. Throughout her life, Camille Rhodes had commanded attention, whether as Franklin Rhodes' daughter, a Harvard graduate, or the executive vice president of their other company. People noticed when she walked into a room. They acknowledged her, deferred to her. But as Janet the cleaner, she might as well have been invisible. Executives stepped around her without a word, sometimes even bumping into her cart without so much as an apology. When she entered offices where people were still working, they carried on their conversations uninterrupted, some of them even discussing confidential business in front of the invisible woman emptying their trash. By the end of that first night, Camille's hands were sore and beginning to blister. She had moved with more clumsiness than grace, but learned quickly, efficiency wasn't a bonus in this world, it was survival. More than that, she began to see patterns. Some employees smiled at the cleaners. Others never once made eye contact. A few left passive-aggressive notes about missed corners or dust. Each day revealed something new about Rhodes Tech, truths she had never seen from her corner office. From the ground up, the values of respect, innovation, and integrity didn't always trickle down. By the start of her second day undercover, Camille, still disguised as Janet, was adapting. The muscle aches had settled into a steady throb instead of sharp pain. The blisters were hardening into calluses. She had learned to shift her weight while mopping, minimizing back strain. But no amount of physical adjustment could prepare her for the psychological pressure Spencer Hayes, the operations supervisor, was about to inflict. Spencer Hayes prided himself on running a tight ship. At 45, he'd clawed his way up the corporate ladder with determination and a willingness to do whatever it took. His pressed shirts, styled hair, and always-present leather portfolio gave the impression of professionalism and control. But behind closed doors, and especially in the eyes of those beneath him, Spencer was a tyrant. To the executive team, he was efficient and capable. To the cleaning crew, he was a menace. His unpredictable moods, exacting standards, and habit of belittling staff made an already grueling job feel impossible. "This is unacceptable," he snapped during their first inspection, holding up a glove with a barely visible smudge after checking the top of a ceiling vent, an area not even on the standard nightly cleaning checklist. "You people need to understand that Rhodes Tech Solutions represents excellence in everything." He ordered the entire third-floor east wing to be recleaned. No exceptions. The crew stayed 2 hours past the end of their shift. No overtime. No thanks. When Maria, a seasoned cleaner, quietly explained that those vents were only part of the quarterly deep clean rotation, Spencer cut her off. "If I wanted excuses, I'd ask for them. What I want is competence, which seems to be in short supply." While his treatment of the cleaning crew was consistently harsh, his fixation on Camille, Janet, was particular. Maybe it was because she was new and didn't yet know to disappear when he walked into a room. Or maybe something about her, the way she carried herself, the quiet confidence that couldn't quite be scrubbed away, made him feel the need to assert control. Whatever the reason, Spencer made her his personal target. No matter how perfectly she cleaned, he found flaws. Windows had streaks visible only under flashlight at a certain angle. Carpets had lint he could only spot when crawling close. Stainless steel gleamed, until he ran a gloved finger across it and announced an invisible fingerprint. During her first solo shift cleaning the executive restrooms, Spencer arrived for a surprise inspection while she was still in the middle of mopping. Instead of waiting, he began criticizing her work immediately, her technique, her supplies, even the way she organized her cart. "Are you deliberately trying to be this incompetent, or does it just come naturally?" he said, loud enough for others to hear. "This is exactly why we should outsource all cleaning to robots. At least they follow instructions." Camille bit her tongue. As executive VP, she could have fired Spencer in an instant. As Janet, she had to nod, apologize, and promise to improve. The other cleaners saw what was happening. Darnell, a longtime employee, pulled her aside after a particularly harsh encounter that left her hands trembling as she refilled her cart. "You need to stay out of his way," he warned, glancing over his shoulder. "Don't give him a reason. He feeds off that." But Spencer didn't need a reason. Later that week, on Thursday night, close to midnight, an incident unfolded that pushed things further. Camille was cleaning the hallway just outside the main conference room on the executive floor. Her cart was neatly positioned against the wall to allow easy passage. The floor was almost empty at 11:30 p.m., with most offices dark and their occupants long gone. She had just finished refilling her bucket with fresh cleaning solution when she heard the distinctive sound of Gerald's leather dress shoes on the marble floor. As he neared, he stopped directly beside her cleaning cart, surveying her work with exaggerated scrutiny. What happened next was no accident. As Gerald resumed walking, he deliberately swung his arm outward, catching the side of Camille's perfectly organized cart. It crashed to the ground with a loud thud. Gerald paused, surveying the mess he had created with a barely concealed smirk. Then he stepped directly through the spilled cleaning solution, leaving bold footprints across the floor Camille had spent the last hour perfecting. He never looked back, never acknowledged the mess, never offered to help or apologize. To him, it wasn't even worth mentioning. Camille stood frozen, staring at the wreckage. In that moment, something fundamental shifted in her understanding of Rhodes Tech Solutions. This wasn't just about disrespect or being invisible. This was calculated cruelty, a deliberate abuse of power carried out without fear of consequence. As she knelt to clean up the mess, fighting back tears of frustration and rage, her mission evolved. It was no longer just about proving herself or understanding the culture. It was about justice for the invisible workforce that kept Rhodes Tech Solutions alive. The same kind of people her father had once been, long before building his empire. When Gerald's behavior escalated in the days that followed, Camille was ready. She documented everything: times, dates, witnesses, exact quotes. She noted which executives enabled him through silence, and which seemed uncomfortable but said nothing. She built her case slowly, methodically, all while maintaining her cover as Janet, the invisible cleaner. Gerald returned just minutes later. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he hissed, stepping closer. Camille remained silent, knowing that any response would only escalate the confrontation. She focused on gathering her supplies, intending to move to the next room. "I'm speaking to you," Gerald snapped. The proper response when a supervisor addresses you is yes, sir, or no, sir. Didn't they teach you basic respect in whatever gutter they pulled you from? "Yes, sir." "Sorry, sir," she replied, the words bitter in her mouth. She had just begun mopping the hallway outside the executive conference room when Gerald deliberately stepped onto the freshly cleaned floor, dragging dirt across the wet surface. "This floor is still filthy," he announced loudly, though they were alone. "Can't you do anything right? Look at these stains. Look at these spots you've missed." Camille glanced down. The floor gleamed under the recessed lighting. There were no stains, except for the footprints Gerald himself had just left. "I just cleaned it, sir," she said, her voice polite, controlled only through sheer force of will. "It was dry and spotless before. Are you contradicting me again?" Gerald interrupted, voice dropping into a low, dangerous tone. Do you think you know more about cleanliness standards at Rhodes Tech Solutions than I do? Without waiting for a response, he picked up a full cup of water from a nearby counter and poured it directly onto her. The cold liquid drenched her hair, ran down her face, soaked through her uniform, and pooled at her feet on the wet floor. The shock of the cold made her gasp, but it was the deliberate, humiliating cruelty that stole her breath. Now you have something real to clean up, Gerald said, his tone eerily calm. He dropped the empty cup on the floor beside her. And don't even think about leaving until you're dry and the floor is spotless. I'll be checking personally before you clock out. Camille stood frozen, water dripping from her hair and clothes, forming a puddle around her feet. The humiliation burned hotter than any anger she had ever felt. In that moment, she wasn't Camille Rhodes, Harvard graduate, executive VP. She wasn't even Janet the cleaner. She was a human being treated as less than one, by a man who knew there would be no consequences for his actions. She fought back the tears that threatened to mix with the moisture on her face and knelt again, soaked clothes clinging to her skin as she mopped up the water. As she worked, she made a silent vow. Spencer Hayes would face the consequences of his actions, not just for what he had done to her, but for the culture of fear and humiliation he had created. One might think Gerald was the only one, but then there was Martin Lowe, the marketing director at Rhodes Tech. At 42, he looked every bit the creative executive, designer glasses, artfully tousled hair, and bespoke suits that projected confidence without veering into overt corporate stiffness. Camille's first encounter with Martin occurred during her second week undercover. His office was part of her rotation that night. A task that should have taken 20 minutes ended up consuming over 3 hours, forcing her to scramble through the rest of her shift. When she first entered Martin's office shortly after 10 p.m., he was still there, staring intently at his computer screen. Unlike many executives who ignored or half-acknowledged the cleaning staff, Martin spoke immediately. "Oh good, you're here," he said without looking up from his screen. "This office is an absolute disaster. We had a creative brainstorming session today, and it needs a thorough cleaning." The office appeared relatively tidy to Camille's now experienced eye. A few coffee cups on a side table, some papers arranged in piles. Nothing that justified his description of absolute disaster. Nevertheless, she nodded and began her standard cleaning routine, starting with emptying the trash bins. Derek watched her work for several minutes, his attention shifting between his computer screen and her movements around the office. As she finished dusting the bookshelves and moved to clean the glass coffee table, he cleared his throat dramatically. "That's not how you clean glass properly," he informed her, rising from his desk to approach. "You're leaving streaks everywhere. You need to use circular motions, not straight lines." Derek watched her with critical attention, pointing out missed spots and offering unsolicited advice about proper cleaning techniques, as if his marketing degree had somehow bestowed expert knowledge in janitorial protocol. After she had cleaned every surface, vacuumed the carpet, and sanitized all touch points according to protocol, Derek performed a theatrical inspection of the room. He ran his finger along surfaces, holding them up to the light as though checking for dust under a microscope. "This simply won't do," he declared with exaggerated disappointment. "The windows still have smudges. The carpet has visible lint. And did you even dust the tops of the picture frames? I'm going to need you to start over and do it properly this time." Camille looked at the immaculate office in disbelief. There were no visible issues with any of the areas he had mentioned, but as Janet the cleaner, she had no authority to contradict him. With a quiet, "Yes, sir," she began the entire process again, starting from the beginning, while Derek returned to his desk, a satisfied expression briefly crossing his face. The second cleaning was even more meticulous than the first. Camille took extra care with each surface, anticipating his criticism. When she finished, Derek once again performed his inspection ritual, this time focusing on entirely different areas. "The baseboards are still dusty, and my desk wasn't properly organized," he claimed, despite the clear rule that cleaners were not to touch personal or work-related items. "And what's that smell? Did you use the wrong cleaning solution? This room should smell fresh and clean, not like chemicals." The cycle repeated a third time, with Derek finding new, increasingly trivial issues after each round of cleaning. By the time he finally declared himself satisfied and left for the night, It was well past midnight, and Camille was significantly behind schedule on her other assignments. Soon enough, Camille learned that Derek's behavior was not unique to her shift. He had a well-established pattern of demanding multiple cleanings of his already spotless office, manufacturing flaws to justify his excessive requests. He would leave coffee cups perched precariously on the edges of bins so they'd spill when removed. He'd scatter paper clips on freshly vacuumed carpets and then complain about sloppy work. After the water bottle incident with Gerald, Camille decided it was time to test the company's reporting structures. If Rhodes Tech Solutions truly valued dignity and respect, as proudly declared in its corporate values, surely the Human Resources Department would address such blatant abuse. K. Mitchell, the HR director, seemed like the ideal person to approach. In her mid-40s with a warm smile and a wardrobe that leaned more casual than business, Karen cultivated an approachable image. Posters throughout the building bore her photo beside the phrase, "Talk to me. Your voice matters." A rainbow sticker and the words "Safe Space" in cheerful font adorned her office door. During her lunch break the day after the water bottle incident, Camille cautiously approached Karen's office. The HR director welcomed her with a warm smile, offering her a seat and a cup of coffee from her personal machine. "What can I do for you today?" Karen asked, her tone encouraging. "I don't think we've met before. Are you new to the cleaning staff?" Camille explained that she was, and then carefully recounted the incident with Gerald, the public humiliation, the deliberate spill, and the water bottle. She kept her tone factual and emotionless, exactly how she would have advised an employee to report misconduct back when she was still executive VP. Karen's expression remained sympathetic throughout, her head tilted slightly, a gesture of concern that seemed genuine. When Camille finished, Karen sighed deeply and reached across the desk to pat her hand, a gesture that hovered between comforting and condescending. "First, I want to thank you for bringing this to my attention," Karen began, her voice shifting into the practiced cadence of corporate HR. "We take all reports of workplace incidents very seriously at Rhodes Tech. That said," she continued, tone still gentle but now tinged with something sharper, "I think there may be some confusion about workplace relationships here. You're just a cleaner, and you should know your place in a company like this. You can't compare yourself to other employees." The message, buried beneath the HR jargon, was clear. You don't really count. Your dignity isn't our concern. Camille thanked her for her time and stood to leave. Karen offered one last bit of advice, her voice lowered as if sharing a confidence. "Between us," she said, "Gerald can be demanding when it comes to cleanliness standards. He has high expectations, and sometimes his communication style is a bit direct. My suggestion? Focus on meeting those standards rather than taking things personally. In corporate environments, thick skin is an asset." With that final dismissal, thinly disguised as mentorship, Camille was effectively shown the door. The safe space sticker seemed to mock her as she stepped out, its promise clearly not meant for those who worked after hours in janitor uniforms. What Karen didn't know was that Camille had secretly recorded their entire conversation on her phone, documentation that would later become crucial evidence of how systematically the company failed its most vulnerable workers. But if Gerald and Derek's cruelty had shown Camille the systemic nature of workplace abuse, her encounter with Celeste Hartman would reveal its most shocking physical manifestation. Celeste Hartman, Senior Vice President of Sales, was a legend at Rhodes Tech Solutions. Her sales team consistently outperformed targets. Her presentations at industry conferences were standing room-only events. Her aggressive negotiation style had secured contracts that transformed the company's market position. At 45, she had the confidence of someone who knew her worth and the temperament of someone unaccustomed to being contradicted. The confrontation happened on a Friday evening during Camille's third week undercover. She had been assigned to clean the main conference room on the 38th floor. Veronica's sharp voice sliced through the air. "Excuse me, where do you think you're going?" Camille paused, surprised by the direct address. "I'm sorry for interrupting, ma'am. This room is scheduled for cleaning at 9 p.m. I'll come back later when you're finished." It was a reasonable response, polite and professional. In any normal workplace, that would have been the end of it. But Celeste Hartman didn't operate according to normal workplace conventions. "How dare you disrupt my meeting?" she snapped, stepping closer. Do I have to waste my valuable time explaining basic professional courtesy to someone who cleans toilets for a living? The verbal assault was loud enough that employees in the surrounding offices began to glance through the glass walls, watching the confrontation unfold, but like the salespeople inside the room, choosing not to intervene. Camille had endured Gerald's public humiliation and Derek's constant degradation. But something about Veronica's rage, aimed at her for simply following an assigned schedule, cut deeper. Perhaps it was the sheer injustice of it. The response that followed wasn't from Janet the cleaner. It was pure Camille Rhodes. "With all due respect," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "I am following the established protocol for this building. If there's a conflict with the cleaning schedule, the proper procedure is to notify facility management in advance so adjustments can be made. I'm simply trying to do my job, just as you're doing yours." The room fell silent. Junior salespeople froze, expressions locked in disbelief that a cleaner would dare respond to Veronica Wells like that. Even Veronica seemed momentarily stunned by the calm, articulate pushback from someone she had already dismissed as irrelevant. But the silence lasted only seconds. Veronica's face twisted in fury. Without warning, her hand swung in a sharp arc, connecting with Camille's cheek in a crack that echoed through the room. The force of the slap snapped Camille's head to the side and sent her stumbling back against her cleaning cart. "Don't you ever talk back to me," Veronica hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "You are nothing here. Nothing. Clean this room now, or don't bother coming back tomorrow." Pain bloomed across Camille's cheek, but it was nothing compared to the shock that froze her in place. In all her years in corporate America, through Harvard Business School and the executive ranks, she had never witnessed such a blatant physical assault in a professional environment, and certainly never experienced it herself. The junior employees didn't speak. They didn't object. They didn't move. They stared at their laptops, their notepads, the ceiling, anywhere but at the violence they had just witnessed. Their silence was its own kind of violence, a quiet, collective agreement that what had happened was either acceptable or not worth risking their careers to confront. In that moment, Camille nearly broke character. The urge to reveal herself, to transform from Janet the cleaner back into Camille Rhodes, executive vice president and daughter of the founder, was nearly overwhelming. One sentence could have ended Veronica's career on the spot, but some deeper instinct held her back. With discipline that surprised even her, Camille lowered her eyes, mumbled an apology, and began cleaning the conference room. The red mark on her cheek burned with humiliation, but her mind had never been clearer. This was her breaking point. Not because the slap hurt more than Gerald's cruelty or Derek's condescension, but because it marked the culmination of a pattern that could no longer be dismissed. Rhodes Tech Solutions, the company her father had built on dignity and respect, had become a place where an employee could be physically assaulted without consequence or comment. As she mechanically wiped down the table, working around a sales team too cowardly to acknowledge her presence, Camille's mission shifted. She was no longer observing company culture or gathering impressions. She was collecting evidence. Every abuse, every leadership failure, every cowardly silence would be documented. Names would be recorded. Dates and details would be logged. And when her 2 weeks undercover were complete, the reckoning would begin. If you were in Camille's shoes, what would you do to them all? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next chapter in the story. By the end of her second week undercover, Camille Rhodes had experienced more than enough mistreatment to justify ending the experiment and returning to her office upstairs. She had witnessed systemic abuse, endured verbal and physical assault, and seen firsthand how those in power protected one another. Her first step was to create a secure system for collecting evidence. The cleaning cart provided perfect cover. No one paid attention to the supplies arranged in its various compartments, giving her ample opportunity to conceal a small, powerful camera and digital voice recorder among the bottles and rags. Her phone, kept silenced in her pocket, allowed her to capture still images when necessary, though she used it sparingly to avoid detection. Her nights soon took on a new pattern. While continuing to perform her cleaning duties with the same careful attention as before, she strategically positioned herself to document conversations in meeting rooms, photograph documents left carelessly on desks, and record the after-hours interactions that revealed the true culture of Rhodes Tech Solutions. Soon, Camille had amassed a damning collection of evidence. With the recordings she discovered the 3 people who had made her life miserable as a cleaner had even more secrets they were keeping. They had been secretly diverting some of the company's funds meant for lower-level workers into their own pockets. Additionally, they were delivering the company's information to their competitors in an attempt to get Mr. Franklin removed as CEO before the succession took place. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. As the end of her planned undercover period approached, Camille faced a critical decision about how to proceed. Simply presenting the evidence to her father would address the immediate conspiracy, but might not solve the deeper cultural issues that had allowed such corruption to flourish. A more public approach risked damaging the company's reputation, harming innocent employees in the process. After gathering overwhelming evidence of systematic abuse, discrimination, and conspiracy at Rhodes Tech Solutions, Camille Rhodes faced her most significant challenge yet: how to expose the corruption in a way that would lead to meaningful change rather than mere damage control. The final phase of her undercover journey would require perfect timing, strategic thinking, and the courage to confront the people who had humiliated and abused her over the past month. The preparation began on Friday evening, a week into her undercover work. After finishing her shift and ensuring no one was following her, she changed into her own clothes in a public restroom several blocks from Rhodes Tech Solutions headquarters. The transformation was dramatic, the headscarf removed, her natural hair styled with professional precision, designer glasses replacing the plain frames of her disguise, and subtle makeup enhancing features she had deliberately downplayed for weeks. She took a rideshare to her father's home in the exclusive Hillcrest neighborhood, a modernist mansion whose glass walls offered panoramic views of the city skyline, including the Rhodes Tech Solutions Tower, where she had been scrubbing floors hours earlier. The physical distance between these worlds was measured in miles, but the psychological distance felt incalculable after her month in the trenches. Franklin Rhodes was waiting in his home office, his expression grave. "You look exhausted," he said simply, studying her face with paternal concern. "I am," Camille admitted, "but not just physically. I'm emotionally exhausted by what I've discovered." For the next 3 hours, she methodically presented her findings, using her laptop to display emails, performance reviews, financial discrepancies, and video evidence of abuse. She documented the systematic mistreatment of support staff. Franklin listened in silence, his expression darkening as the evidence mounted. When she showed him the video of Veronica Wells slapping Janet, the cleaner, his fist clenched involuntarily. When she played the recording of Spencer Hayes pouring water on her, his jaw tightened with barely controlled anger. "They've betrayed everything this company stands for," he said, his voice quiet but vibrating with intensity. "Everything I've built, everything I believed in." Camille nodded, understanding that her father's reaction wasn't just about the personal affront to his daughter, but about the violation of the principles upon which he had built his life's work. "The question is," she said, "how do we address this in a way that creates real change?" Together, they developed a strategy that would expose the corruption publicly. Franklin would call an emergency board meeting for Monday morning to discuss urgent company concerns that had come to his attention. All department heads and senior management would be required to attend, including Gerald, Karen, Derek, Marcus, and Veronica, the 5 executives at the center of the conspiracy. The board members would be briefed in advance on the general nature of the issues, but not on the specific evidence or Camille's undercover role. This would ensure their genuine reactions when the full situation was revealed. Most importantly, Camille would continue her role as Janet, the cleaner, through Monday morning, maintaining her cover until the precise moment of revelation. This would require one final night of humiliation, but it would be worth it for the justice that would follow. Their planning continued well past midnight, addressing contingencies and refining the approach. Before Camille left, Franklin hugged her again, this time with a new respect in his eyes. "I thought this experience would teach you about leadership," he said, "but it seems you're teaching me. Whatever happens Monday, I want you to know I'm proud of you, not just as my daughter, but as the future of Rhodes Tech Solutions." By Sunday night, everything was in place. The board had been notified, the evidence was prepared, and security personnel had been quietly briefed on potential responses when the revelations became public. All that remained was the confrontation itself and Camille's final performance as Janet, the cleaner. Monday morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight gleaming off the glass and steel of the Rhodes Tech Solutions tower. Camille arrived in her cleaner's uniform for what would be her last shift in disguise. She had deliberately scheduled herself for the executive floor, ensuring she would be assigned to clean the boardroom before the 10 a.m. emergency meeting. At 8:30 a.m., as executives began arriving for their normal workday, unaware of the reckoning to come, Camille pushed her cleaning cart toward the executive boardroom on the 42nd floor. The space was impressive, a massive oval table of polished walnut surrounded by leather chairs. She had just begun dusting when Spencer Hayes entered, his expression sour at finding her there. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, briefcase clutched in one hand and coffee in the other. "This room needs to be perfect for an emergency board meeting at 10. "I'm assigned to clean it, sir," Camille replied, maintaining the deferential tone she had perfected over the past month. "I'll be finished well before 10. Gerald's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the room. "Make sure it's actually clean this time. The CEO and board members will be here. If I find a single speck of dust, you'll be fired. I'll check your work before the meeting," he added, his tone making clear that he was hoping to find fault. "Now get moving. People will be arriving soon." By 9:45 a.m., executives and board members had begun gathering outside the boardroom, their expressions confused or concerned about the unexpected meeting. Franklin Rhodes arrived last, acknowledging greetings with brief nods, but offering no explanation for the emergency session. His eyes briefly met Camille's as she mopped near the door, a subtle glance that contained volumes of unspoken communication before he turned away to maintain their charade. At 9:55 a.m., Gerald returned to inspect the boardroom, making a show of checking surfaces for dust and running his finger along the windowsill. As executives began taking their seats around the table, he announced loudly, "You missed spots on the windows, though the glass was immaculate. And the table hasn't been properly polished. This is exactly the kind of sloppy work I've come to expect from new people." "I'll take care of it right away, sir," Camille responded, moving to re-clean areas that needed no attention. As the clock hit 10 a.m., Franklin Rhodes called the meeting to order, his authoritative voice cutting through the murmured conversations around the table. Camille continued cleaning in the background, moving quietly around the room's perimeter, seemingly focused on her work, but missing nothing of the discussion. "I've called this emergency meeting to address serious concerns about the corporate culture at Rhodes Tech Solutions," Franklin began, his tone grave. "Over the past month, evidence has come to my attention suggesting that we've strayed significantly from the core values upon which I built this company." The room fell silent, executives exchanging uneasy glances. Karen from HR straightened in her seat, pen poised over her notepad, as if preparing to document solutions to a problem she had helped create. Martin Lowe maintained his carefully cultivated creative persona, though his fingers drummed nervously on the table. Marcus Winters adjusted his tie repeatedly, while Celeste Hartman maintained a mask of professional interest that revealed nothing of her thoughts. "Get out," Gerald shouted, trying to get rid of the cleaning lady. "This is sensitive corporate business." The moment had arrived, the culmination of 2 weeks of humiliation, documentation, and strategic patience. All eyes turned briefly toward the unassuming cleaner in the gray uniform, expecting her to scurry from the room as commanded. Instead, Camille set her mop carefully against the wall. She straightened to her full height, squared her shoulders, and turned to face the assembled executives with a calm dignity that immediately commanded attention. Looking directly at Gerald Hayes, she spoke in a clear, confident voice that bore no resemblance to Janet's deferential tones. "Actually, I'd like to stay, Gerald," Camille interrupted, using his first name with the casual authority of someone who had every right to do so. "But I think you're the one who doesn't understand the situation." With deliberate movements, she removed the headscarf that had covered her hair, letting her natural curls frame her face. She took off the plain glasses that had been part of her disguise, reaching into her pocket to replace them with her designer frames. Finally, she unzipped the gray cleaner's uniform to reveal a professionally tailored blazer and blouse underneath. The transformation was electric. Around the table, expressions shifted from confusion to shock as recognition dawned. These executives had all worked with Camille Rhodes for years. They had attended meetings with her, reported to her, discussed strategy with her. Yet none had recognized her beneath the disguise of Janet because they had never truly seen the cleaning staff as people worthy of notice. I'm Camille Rhodes, and I am the new CEO of this company, as my dad's successor, she announced, though by now no introduction was necessary. Everyone was bewildered. Nobody expected that the cleaner they had belittled was now their CEO. The silence in the room was absolute, everyone's mouth wide open. Camille tapped a small remote she retrieved from her pocket, advancing the presentation to specific evidence she had been gathering. I've been documenting the toxic culture in this company, a culture that contradicts everything Rhodes Tech Solutions claims to stand for. Video appeared on the screen, showing Spencer Hayes pouring water on Janet, captured from a security camera angle that showed his face clearly. The timestamp and location were visible in the corner, leaving no room for denial. Gerald's face drained of color as he watched himself on screen, his habitual arrogance crumbling in the face of undeniable evidence. That's taken out of context, Gerald stammered. She was insubordinate. Pouring water on an employee is assault, Gerald. Camille calmly cut him off. There is no context that makes it acceptable. The presentation advanced again, this time showing Martin Lowe in his office, forcing Janet to clean the same surfaces repeatedly while making increasingly trivial complaints. Martin Lowe, marketing director, has routinely abused his authority to waste cleaning staff time, forcing repeated unnecessary work and creating deliberate dominance. Derek started to speak, but Camille continued without allowing interruption, moving systematically through the evidence she had gathered. As the evidence mounted, some board members began taking notes furiously. Others sat back with expressions of shock or disgust. One elderly board member removed his glasses, polished them as if the action might somehow change what he was seeing, then shook his head in disbelief when the evidence remained just as damning. Celeste Hartman was the first to attempt a defense, her sales executive instincts pushing her to control the narrative. This is a gross mischaracterization. That video has clearly been edited to make it look like. Camille cut her off by advancing to the next slide. A different camera angle of the same incident appeared, showing the slap from a perspective that captured both Veronica's face and the shocked reactions of the witnesses. Would you like me to play the audio as well, Miss Wells? Camille asked. Your exact words were, "Don't you ever talk back to me. You are nothing here." Nothing. Veronica fell silent, her carefully constructed professional image shattered beyond repair. By the time Camille concluded her presentation, the atmosphere in the boardroom had transformed completely. The arrogance and entitlement that had characterized the accused executives had crumbled into a mix of shock, fear, and desperate calculation of possible escapes from the situation. Spencer Hayes, seeing the writing on the wall, knew it was over for him. "I thought you were just an ordinary cleaner. Please, don't let me lose my job," he pleaded. The door opened just after, revealing two security officers who had been stationed outside. "Mr. Hayes, we've been instructed to ensure you leave the premises after this meeting," one officer said. Gerald turned back to face Franklin Rhodes, his expression a mix of disbelief and fury. "You can't be serious. After everything I've done for this company. After everything you've done to this company," Franklin corrected him, standing to address the room for the first time since Camille had begun her presentation. "What we've witnessed today isn't just about individual behavior, though that alone would warrant immediate termination. This is about a fundamental betrayal of everything Rhodes Innovation stands for." He moved to stand beside his daughter, a physical demonstration of solidarity that sent a clear message to everyone present. "Camille undertook this investigation at my request as part of our succession planning process. What neither of us anticipated was the level of corruption, discrimination, and abuse she would uncover," Franklin continued. He turned to address the board members directly. "I founded this company on principles of integrity, innovation, and respect for every individual who contributes to our success. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of those values. Today, we begin the process of reclaiming them." The next hour was devoted to immediate actions. The board terminated Spencer Hayes, Melissa Trent, Martin Lowe, and Celeste Hartman for gross misconduct, effective immediately. Security was instructed to escort them from the building after they surrendered company devices and access credentials. They were all fired. Gerald's departure was equally revealing. As security prepared to escort him from the boardroom, He turned to Franklin with a desperate appeal. 30 years, Franklin. I've given this company 30 years. You can't just throw that away based on a few incidents taken out of context. Franklin's response was measured but unyielding. You're right, Gerald. 30 years is significant, which makes it all the more disappointing that you chose to use your position to abuse those with less power, rather than to embody the values this company was built on. As Gerald was led away, Camille felt a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction at justice served, but also a deep sense of responsibility. The meeting continued with discussions about the immediate steps to address the cultural issues revealed by her investigation. As the meeting concluded, board members approached Camille individually. Some offered congratulations on her thorough investigation, others expressed shock and apologies for the treatment she had endured. Throughout, she maintained the calm, strategic demeanor that had allowed her to gather the evidence while enduring weeks of abuse, the same qualities that would serve her well as CEO. When the boardroom finally emptied, leaving only Camille and her father, Franklin embraced her with pride evident in every aspect of his posture. You've done something remarkable here, he said quietly. Not just exposing corruption, but experiencing firsthand what needs to change. I couldn't have done it. My pride wouldn't have allowed me to maintain that cover through what you endured. Camille's eyes filled with unexpected tears, not from the memory of humiliation, but from the realization of how deeply this experience had transformed her understanding of leadership. Franklin nodded. The board wants to accelerate the succession timeline after today's presentation. They're convinced you're ready. Camille looked out over the city skyline, considering the weight of responsibility she was about to assume and the changes she intended to implement. I am ready, she agreed, but not because I'm your daughter or because I have the right degrees. I'm ready because I've seen this company from the bottom up. I've experienced what works and what desperately needs to change. She picked up the gray cleaner's uniform she had discarded during her revelation, folding it carefully rather than dismissively. This taught me more about leadership than Harvard ever could, and I won't forget those lessons when I'm sitting at the head of this table. As they left the boardroom together, Camille paused by the cleaning cart she had pushed for 2 weeks. There's one more thing I need to do before this becomes official. The transformation of Rhodes Tech Solutions didn't happen overnight. Cultural change required consistent effort, honest confrontation of remaining problems, and the humility to acknowledge that perfection remained elusive. There were setbacks and challenges, resistance from some who benefited from the old system, and the inevitable complications of implementing broad structural changes in a large organization. But 6 months after Camille's undercover journey ended, Rhodes Tech Solutions had become a fundamentally different company, one where employees at all levels reported higher job satisfaction, productivity measures showed consistent improvement, and turnover rates dropped significantly, particularly among previously underrepresented groups. For Camille herself, the experience created personal transformation as profound as the organizational changes she implemented. The physical hardships of cleaning work had changed her body, building strength and endurance she hadn't known she needed. The emotional challenges of being treated as invisible had deepened her empathy and sharpened her perception of power dynamics in ways her privileged upbringing and education never could. These changes were visible in how she operated as a leader. In executive meetings, she noticed who spoke and who was interrupted, consciously creating space for diverse perspectives. When visiting departments, she greeted maintenance staff by name, with the same respect afforded to directors. Her decisions were informed by a 360-degree understanding of how they would affect everyone in the organization, not just those with titles similar to hers. 3 months after the boardroom confrontation, Franklin Rhodes officially announced his retirement and Camille's succession as CEO. The company, in the remaining years, grew abundantly under her leadership. If you love this story, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button now. See you in the next video.